Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Simone. I'm Community Manager at Oxford Dictionaries and I will be hosting the session today. And I'm delighted to be here with Sagar Sodah, and he will be talking to us about his Facebook chatbot. So now, without further ado, I'm handing it over to you, Sagar, so you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Simone. Hi, my name is Sagar Sodah. I am a visually impaired software developer from Mumbai, and I work as a software engineer in an education startup here in Mumbai, and I'm also the founder of Impact Tech. So, very briefly, at Impact Tech, we create technologies that create social impact. And about 2 years back, a little more than 2 years back, I created a dictionary chatbot on Facebook. This was the time when I was still learning. I came across chatbots and I wanted to learn more about how chatbots work and how you code them. So I started playing with some technologies and I just tried to create something um, just as a learning project. So let me just briefly tell you more about what WITMO Dictionary Chatbot does, and then we'll do a quick demo just to show you how it works. The dictionary chatbot allows you to get definitions of words. You can ask questions like, "What is the meaning of happiness or gratitude?" And it gives you the definition. It pulls this information from Oxford Dictionaries API, and it also gives you synonyms and antonyms. You can get examples of how words are used in sentences. And if you type a word which it cannot find in the dictionary, it does a search and gives you possible words that you're looking for with the correct spelling, and you can choose them, and it gives the definition of that corrected word. Simone, if you can just show a quick demo, and then I can explain how I built the chatbot.
Yes, of course, I will show it in action now. So let's go to the live chatbot. So I'm going to ask, well, there is an example already there, Saga. I don't know if you want to talk about this one first.
Yeah, can you just read what you've written to the
Yep.
bot?
So the question was define harmony.
Okay. So what the chatbot does is it once you say something like define harmony or what is the meaning of harmony, it understands that the user is looking for the definition, and it also understands that the word that the user is looking for is harmony, and it then calls the Oxford Dictionary API with the word harmony, and it calls the definition endpoint, and whatever data it gets from Oxford, it then shows it to you on the chatbot here. And it also checks if there are synonyms of harmony, examples of harmony available in the dictionary API. And if it is, it gives you options to then choose from those and get that information as well.
Should I show you some of the examples maybe?
Yeah, maybe just click one of those buttons there.
So if I click on examples of harmony, just below the definition, here we go. It brings two examples. So we've got two example sentences there. The piece owes its air of tranquility largely to the harmony, an exciting variety of improvised harmonies. Shall I do a live example now, Sega?
Yeah, so the part that works beautifully and the way chatbots are supposed to be designed is you should allow the user to ask the same question in different ways. So you've done define harmony, right? So maybe now we can ask the same question in a different way. For example,
Okay,
what is
so
the meaning of harmony?
so let me ask you as a proper question. So what is the meaning of harmony? And I've got the same results as before. I've got the definition. So
Same as
harmony,
yeah.
a combination of simultaneously sounded musical notes to produce a pleasing effect. And I've got a link to the examples, words like harmony and also antonyms, the opposites.
Right. So now, if you click on words like harmony, it gives you the synonyms of harmony. But what I really want to show the users right now, don't click on it yet,
Oh,
is that oh, you did click on it. That's okay. So now,
I've
when you
clicked on
click
it.
on it,
Sorry.
it sends words like harmony as if it's a text message from the user, and it processes it just as if it's a text message, and it's going to give you the synonyms of harmony now.
And there you go.
Okay, perfect. Um, do you see the words?
No, actually, I thought it was opening the words, but we don't. It might be that this particular entry didn't have any synonyms there.
It's possible. We can let's try something like synonyms of sarcasm.
So I'm asking it again. What's the meaning of sarcasm? Ah, sorry, not the fault of the bot. My fault. Ah, so there you go. You've got now the full entry, the definition, the examples,
Right.
and the
It doesn't
synonym.
give you the button for synonyms because synonyms aren't there in the dictionary corpus. Um, so that's why it wasn't getting it before that as well.
Hmm.
But if you now try,
Hmm. So
if you now
let's
try,
click on.
yeah, wait. What I'm trying to get at is if you type, can you tell me words similar to happiness? I'm just coming up with a sentence here.
Can you,
It should still be able to answer that question.
so can you tell me words
Yeah,
similar to
words similar to happiness.
happiness?
Yeah,
Ah, we've got some synonyms there. We've got contentment,
yeah,
pleasure, contentedness, satisfaction, and cheerfulness.
perfect. Now, if you click on any one of them, it gives you the definition of that word.
Okay, I'm clicking on contentment. Yep, there you go.
Okay, perfect. So now, so that's the way. That's a very important part of a chatbot is the ability to understand natural language and to understand the same question uh, as the user types it out in different ways, which is a very important aspect of chatbot. And I'm just going to show the users now, show all of you how what the overview of my chatbot system is like and which part of it does what.
Okay, I'm just going back to your slides.
Okay, so now as I said, this was really a learning project for me, and initially when I built it, uh, all I wanted to do was first of all learn about how chatbots work, how chatbots are built. And since I was doing that anyway, I decided, I would build something. And I checked there was no dictionary chatbot on Facebook. So I thought, let's just build that. And I looked for APIs. And around that time, I think the Oxford Dictionary API was in beta mode at that time. And I thought that's a perfect combination of APIs and technologies. I just put them together and I created a chatbot. And interestingly, what happened after that was um, a lot of people started using it, which I honestly didn't expect that people would start using it. But as I saw the usage go up, I thought I should know who the people are. And when I checked analytics on Facebook, on the Facebook page, to my surprise, a lot of the users, in fact, about 75-80% of the users, were either from Thailand or Philippines or Burma, Myanmar. And that was kind of a shocker because I assumed that the users would be from English speaking countries like USA or UK. And I thought the users would be um, content creators or writers or poets who want to look for different words, synonyms, who want to look for definitions of specific words. But that was not true. So what was happening was a lot of, first of all, in Burma, Myanmar, and some of the other countries, Facebook Messenger is heavily used, and it's also in some cases part of the feature phones that they get, the low-cost ones, which I didn't know and which I honestly didn't expect. Um, But this is what I learned when I started talking to some of my users. And I also learned that some of them, they actually sit in groups to learn English. And that is seen as a way to kind of increase their income, and they wanted to learn English that way, and they created groups to learn English. They started reading novels, and when they came across a word they didn't understand, using the Facebook chatbot was the easiest way for them to find a definition, find synonyms, find examples, and they use that to learn English. This really made me think of the chatbot in a very different way, and I looked back at what I was doing and I changed a lot of things. Those buttons we saw were not there before. The user had to actually type synonyms of happiness to get synonyms. You couldn't just click the button over there after getting the definitions of happiness. So I added those buttons in because now I knew that the users I am dealing with have come across this word for the first time. So I thought they might want to know about examples. They might want to know about synonyms of the same word whose definition they're looking for. So really, the way I designed the interface of the chatbot changed when I got a real understanding of the audience that was using the chatbot. So that was a very good experience for me. If you can, Simon, can you just go to the next slide? I'll explain the overview of the chatbot and how it was
Yes.
built. Okay, so the flow is it starts from the mobile phone that you're using, and as soon as you type something on Messenger, it goes to the Facebook. Um, it goes to Facebook and calls an API. So normally, what happens is you create your entire software and you start talking to Facebook. Now that is very difficult to do. So I used a tool called Gupshup, which helps me connect to Facebook, and in which I can write my code. So I don't have to write the code or worry about connecting with Facebook. I can also connect with Slack and Telegram and other chat applications. So Gupshup is a very important tool for chatbot creation, and it helps you to write a small piece of code and connect it to multiple chat platforms, or even if you want to connect it to a single chat platform. With Gupshup, you can do it literally in 5 minutes without any coding. So Gupshup is really a key part of the puzzle over here. And once I had a basic code written in Gupshup, I also wanted my code to be sort of easy to access, and I needed a lot of server time, which I could not get directly on Gupshup at that point. So what I did was I created a template on Gupshup, which then calls my code, which is put on Heroku. Heroku is a cloud platform where you can put your code and do what you want with it. So the real code of my chatbot is really in that box on the bottom right, which includes Heroku, Oxford Dictionary API, and it includes Dialogflow on the left. So that's really my chatbot, and the ones on the top are just the tools that I use to connect to Facebook Messenger, right? So connecting to Facebook Messenger is kind of complicated, and that is sometimes is what stops people from starting to create chatbots. So my suggestion is use Gupshup. It really simplifies that part of the process, and you can focus on the actual logic of the code. So now the logic goes in that bottom right box over there, and that has three small pieces to it. The core logic is in my case, it's a Node.js uh, application which goes on Heroku. You can develop it in whichever language you want. And from there, I call Oxford Dictionary APIs once I know that I have to find the definition of happiness. I have to call the definition endpoint of Oxford Dictionary along with the word happiness. But now, the tricky part now here, the second tricky part of a chatbot is how do you convert that text that the user types, which is in natural language, to and extract meaningful information from it. So, for example, if the user types, what is the definition of happiness, I need to first of all figure out that the user is looking for the definition. And then I need to figure out the user wants the definition of the word happiness. So there are two parts to this. One is the intent of the user, and the second is the entity for which they want the definition for. In this case, it's happiness, right? So all of this work of understanding the natural language is done using a natural language understanding tool, and Google's Dialogflow is one of them. You can also use Microsoft's Lewis here, and you can also use Facebook's bit.ai. There are also some other platforms out there that can be used. There are some um, ones that you can open source, which you can build it on your own server as well. I used Dialogflow because it was fairly easy to use, and it is the one I came across first. So yeah, I want to now explain Dialogflow a little more in detail, for which we'll go to the next slide, and I will explain how a sentence is converted into
Yep.
intents and entities. Right. So let's take, for example, the sentence, what is the definition of happiness? Um, what I have done is when I created an agent. It's called an agent in Dialogflow. There are different words in different platforms. I've given it a few different intents. I've given it the define intent. I've given it an example intent, a synonym intent, an antonym intent, and I have given on Dialogflow. I've set it up in such a way that every intent I've given it examples of sentences that a user could use when they mean define, or when they mean synonym or antonym. So I would go into define and say, what is the definition of sun, sun? And Dialogflow understands this as a sentence which is similar to what is the definition of sun would go in the define intent, and I can mark the word sun as a word, which is my entity. If I do this enough number of times, if I do it in the right way, the Dialogflow agent starts to understand the natural language and is able to start converting multiple different sentences, different kinds of sentences, different ways of saying the same thing into intents and entities. So that's what the chatbot does when it sees what is the definition of happiness. It understands that the intent is defined and that the entity word is happiness. Once I have this information, I can call Oxford Dictionaries API and get the information. Something similarly happens, for example, in synonyms. So for example, if I write, what is the synonym of happiness? The agent in Dialogflow understands this as a sentence with the intent synonym instead of define. This time it understands it as synonym, and I just have a simple if else condition on my code, which checks the intent. And if the intent is synonym, I call this synonym endpoint in Oxford Dictionaries. Now it also understands. Similarly, for the synonym intent, I have also given it examples of sentences which are not just what is the synonym of a word, but also give me words like happiness. It will understand that also as a synonym intent. Similarly, if I say something like, what is the opposite of happiness? It understands that as a antonym intent. So that's how the Dialogflow works, and this is the other very crucial part of building a chatbot. And if you get this right, you can really build a very good chatbot which understands multiple different kinds of sentences. So I've given a few examples of sentences below that you can read, and these are the sentences that I put in the agent to train it, and it trains on these sentences. There's also so what just a brief description of what Dialogflow does is it creates a model out of these intents, entities, and examples of intents that we give, and it trains on those models. It has its own underlying model, and it does something like a transfer learning algorithm, and it takes a little bit of time to train, but once it's trained, the end if you, as when you call the Dialogflow endpoint, it doesn't take much time to give you a response. It converts your sentence into a entity and intents. So this is slightly is a little bit of a complicated part. So if anyone has any questions on this, I'll be more than happy to answer, and you can also write to me if you have any more detailed doubts about this.
Sega, sorry for interrupting. There is actually a question that came in just now, and it's
Okay.
specifically about dialogue flow. So, do you want me to keep it
Okay.
to the end or ask it now?
I think, yeah, we can answer it right now.
Okay, so the question is, have you used any other chatbot builder frameworks? How would you rate dialogue flow compared to other frameworks in the market?
I've used Microsoft Lewis. I've used Facebook's Fit.ai, and I think Dialogflow does a very good job. Um, there are some things which Microsoft Lewis does better, but in my case for this chatbot and for some other chatbots that I've built, the another feature that Dialogflow gives it is it also has the ability to answer standard questions like how are you, what is your age. It gives you the ability to answer those questions also, which really makes it gives the chatbot a sense of character, and I think that is very important for chatbots. So that is a feature which I think, which is why I think Dialogflow is much better than the other ones. But in a sense, you really have to see what your use case is and which one suits you better. They all do a pretty much good job otherwise. So can we go to the next slide, Simone? Okay, so in terms of things that I wished I knew from before. Of course, one of them was the target audience, which I completely got. I got that completely wrong when I was creating the chatbot, and after I created, when I started talking to a few users, I got that completely wrong. But another thing that I did not do was I did not have analytics with me, and after I put in analytics, I realized how important that is and how I could. Um, Use that to understand my interface and to understand what is working, what is not working. For example, those buttons you saw after the answer for the definition comes in, that was not there before. And when I put that, I saw user engagement almost become grow by 60% once I put those buttons over there. So I could see all of that, and which I could not before without analytics. So since then, every project I build, I put analytics is one of the first things you put into the project. That's a learning I got while building this chatbot. And the other thing I learned was that Facebook Messenger um, apparently is quite famous in countries which I did not think would be. And I thought Facebook Messenger, the only way to put Facebook Messenger in a phone was to have an Android or iOS phone, but I didn't know there were featured phones with Facebook Messenger on it. So I think when I'm building a product next time, I'm gonna do more research on the platform and the users across the world. At that time, I also did not really think about users in different countries. I only thought about the place where I live. But then once you build something on the internet, it goes to anyone in the whole world. It's accessible to anyone in the world, and that's a big learning for me from there. Yeah, so I think we can wrap up now,
Mhm.
and we can go to question and answers if anyone has any.
So thank you, Sagar. It was really interesting. And yes, we do have a few questions that came in a bit earlier. So the first one I've got here is, what features do you plan to add in the future?
Yeah, I'm working on adding the language translation capabilities of Oxford Dictionary, and that's one feature I want to add. I'm still figuring out how the UI has to work. So that's a feature to look out for, and I'm also thinking of something like word of the week or word of the day. Since most of my users are learning English, I think this would be very helpful to them.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, oh, it's a question about money. So how much did it cost you to make the project live?
Huh. So when I built this project, as I've already explained, I was really building something which was for learning about chatbots and how to build chatbots. So I specifically chose Dialogflow and Gupshup and Heroku because they all have a free tier, and it didn't cost me anything to put it up live on these platforms.
Okay, cool. And I've got another question here. Why did you choose this particular coding language?
Yeah, so I just wrote a script on the server side, which is called Node.js, to build this one. And I thought since I'm learning to build a chatbot anyway, I may as well code this in a new language, which I don't know. So even the language was new for me, and I took that as a part of the learning challenge as well.
Okay, thank you. There's another question about Dialogflow. So, how long did
Yeah,
you need to train Dialogflow to get satisfactory results?
not much. It's a very fast process. It depends on how many intents entities and how complicated the intents are in your particular use case. For this dictionary bot with just 4 or 5 intents, I think it took me half an hour to set it up. But then, as people started using the bot over the next 2 or 3 months, I learned about new ways in which people ask the same question. I started adding those into the agent and making it better and better. So I think with Dialogflow and with chatbot, it's very important to um, preempt what questions people will ask, put those into your training model, but then also then look at analytics, look at your logs, and see what people are really asking, and then keep training the bot so it understands all those other things. So there's always a period of 1 to 3 months after you've gone live in which you want to keep training the bot.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking through the chat, and it seems to be that these are all the questions that we have for now. I can't see any other questions, so I just want to thank you once again, Sagar, for the presentation. It was really nice to learn about WITMO's journey, but also thanks everyone who attended today. I hope you enjoyed it too, and I wish everyone a good day.
Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Simone.
Yeah, thank you, and bye bye, everyone.